going to talk tonight about alpha assessments powered by Learnosity that are in our eAlpha platform. So an outline of what we're going to do tonight, a brief introduction to alpha assessments powered by Learnosity, a demonstration by me on how to log in as a teacher, assign a test, and then log in as a student to take the test, and then log in as a teacher to view the reports. And then we have a time at the end where each of you can practice with your own student and teacher logins. The other thing that you might want to keep in mind is that you can take those logins with you. They'll be active for 30 days, so you can go in and practice and play around with it. That's really the best way to learn it, is playing around with it yourself as a practice teacher and a practice student. And then at the end, we'll have time for question and answer. We'll do some of that question and answer while others of you might decide you want to practice with the logins that you have. So we're going to follow the same instructional model that we do in our Alpha program. We're going to have a presentation, then we're going to demonstrate where I will show you or demonstrate, and then you're going to practice. So it's sort of an I do, you do, we do kind of thing. So why would we choose to do Learnosity? Well, we have Learnosity integrated into our eAlpha platform. It's an online assessment tool used by dozens of companies, including Alpha Publishing. Millions and millions of students use this and teachers use this platform. It's also used by other publishers. And so some of you may be familiar with Learnosity from your teaching other programs. So Alpha Publishing fully integrated Learnosity into our eAlpha platform. So those of you who've used our program, you know that we have print material, and then we have the corresponding digital or interactive eAlpha platform, and that's where our assessments are located. And during the demonstration, I'll show you how you can find those assessments and how you can assign them and how you can view the reports. And you're likely familiar with our other eAlpha online resources, our interactive student resources. We have ancillaries there like games and activities, multiple intelligence, all kinds of other lesson planners and things like that. We have videos, we have flashcards, and one of the latest additions has been simulations. So if you haven't been on eAlpha's platform to look at our Alpha Sims, you might want to do that. They're pretty amazing. We have a partnership with FET, which is a company in Colorado. And then also we have a complement of teacher resources, and now we have a full suite of assessments. So Alpha assessments powered by Learnosity are aligned to our program: Common Core ELA, Common Core Mathematics, and NGSS Science. And these are aligned to our program. And with Alpha assessments, you'll have innovative question types, you'll have engaging items, and fully integrated teacher resources. So we're really excited to bring you this product, and it's been in the works for a long time, and we're really glad that it's being released. So let's talk for a minute about Learnosity, because there's lots of vocabulary to learn when you're in Learnosity's tool. The reason why we're going to talk about it is because eventually, probably within the next few months, we're going to have integrated into our platform the ability for you as teachers to write your own assessments. And so the reason why we're talking about Learnosity, but also talking about Alpha assessments, is because eventually in our tool, you'll be able to go in and create your own. And so some of the terminology is a little bit unique to Learnosity's platform. The assessments are called activities, and that's mostly because they have dual use. So they're fully aligned to Alpha's program, and they're also in addition to our ExamView Pro assessments. So if you've been on eAlpha, you can download the ExamView Pro test generator. There are some test banks there and lots of items that you can use in ExamView. However, those are not aligned to our Alpha specific program. So there's no Science Grade 5 Chapter 2 Lesson 1 quiz. There's content that you can use to build your own, but what we've done with Learnosity is we've built those tests for you. So activities can be used as assessments, they can be used as practice, depending on your preference. And we have over 2,200 activities ready to go across the content areas. And we have activities that are composed of items, and an item is a single question. And we have more than 18,000 items ready. In fact, I just checked today and we have 22,000 items ready. So we've got quite a big variety there for you to use. And we're hoping this is going to be really helpful to you as teachers. There are two types of assessments or activities that we have pre-built for you. The Alpha assessments powered by Learnosity gives you formative assessments. So those monitor student learning, they provide feedback to the teachers and students, and we'll see in the reports how you can see where a student missed something, where there might be a problem in your class. Maybe every student missed the same question, so it gives you a point to go back and stress something that was missed. It'll give you information that'll help you improve student achievement, and also collect information to help shape your teaching or to intervene if a student needs additional help. We also have summative assessments that evaluate the proficiency at a unit or a course or a program level. So we do have unit tests, we have end of year, beginning of year, we have those kinds of tests as well. We have followed assessment best practices. So we have long-range planning to cover reading, literature, math, and science content in an appropriate way for grade level and for readability. We also have very clear items closely aligned to Alpha's program. We have a suitable range of DOKs. For those of you familiar with depth of knowledge, we have items that are 1s, 2s, and some 3s. And of course, you probably are aware that DOK 4 is very difficult to do in this kind of assessment arena, but we do have DOK 1, 2s, and 3s. We purposefully reduce the reading and spelling barriers in order for students to show mastery of content. So for example, we use a lot of drop downs and draggers so that students don't miss an item because they misspell. So if they misspell a word, we've given it to them as a drop down or a dragger in order to test their science knowledge, not their reading or spelling. And then we have ongoing long-term use of assessments to monitor student progress and encourage continuous improvement. So in the assessments on eAlpha, you'll see that you can assign them to students, and they can be assigned as tests or quizzes. They can be assigned as practice. The only requirement is to input a day where they can start it and a day where they can end it. And you can assign that, and feel free to assign things however you see fit in your classroom. So it's very versatile. So how will teachers use this? The Learnosity activities are more than just tests and quizzes, and you might use them to review for a chapter test or unit test. We have converted several components of our student books and our practice books and our assessment books, along with writing new items for most of our grade levels. We'll go through some of the grade level specifics and content area specifics later, but we have lots of different things for you to choose from. So for example, if you're a grade 4 math teacher and you're familiar with our grade 4 math program, we have checkpoints, we have reflection checks, we have chapter tests and finish line that are in the book. And those have all been put into Learnosity so they can be assigned as interactive activities. Also, you could use the assessments to practice and review for standardized tests. Now, we are not a standardized test prep company. However, we do know as teachers that that repeated learning, repeated exposure, repeated practice is a best practice for student retention of that information. And so you can either eventually build your own, or you can use some of our our tests in order to practice for some of those standardized tests. We also have beginning of year and end of year testing. And I believe in the elementary, it's called cumulative assessments. And then you can also review prior content. So if a student is struggling, or you need to differentiate for some reason, or provide more practice, you can do that. You can go back to prior chapters, prior lessons, and assign content to students to help them get caught up. Some of the great features of Alpha assessments are that the activities will rescale on devices of different screen sizes. So whether a student is taking a test or doing a practice on a tablet or a laptop, it resizes. So that's a fantastic feature. There's not a lot of additional scrolling to try to get them to the right place. And questions are engaging and interesting and interactive. And as teachers, you're going to love the graphing tools. We have coordinate graphs, line graphs, bar graphs, number line graphs, statistical graphs. And your students will love the art, the interactivity of the tests, and you have flexibility in assigning those different activities for different student needs. So let's talk for a few minutes about what kinds of items we have. In our bank, Learnosity has, I'm not sure exactly how many item types because they add new ones quite frequently, but probably 20 to 30 different item types. And we chose the most common dozen or so to feature in our first release. Our intention is to go back through and add more depth to the test banks. But for now, what we've chosen to do is multiple choice, multiple select. We also have items that are drag and drop down. Those are primarily used either with or without images. And oftentimes the drop down is used when there might be a barrier in terms of spelling. And so we might want to make sure that the student gets it right, not because they misspelled, they get it wrong. So we also have classifying, matching, ordering, those kinds of assessment items. We have graphing, and of course we have essay items, and for literature and reading, we do have some passage items, and some of the science items have passages as well. So a wide variety, and we're going to go through and look at some examples, and then we're going to do the demo part where we jump to Learnosity within our eAlpha platform and look at what's available to you as a teacher. So this is a typical multiple choice item. This one happens to be from math, and we're going to show a variety of different math, science, reading, literature, so that you kind of get a feel for what's there. Your particular login, or you in particular as a teacher, will have content specific access. So you may not see all of these different things on your access, but this is a grade 8 multiple choice item. So there's a table, and then the student is asked to choose multiple choice, which display correctly represents the data. We also have some items that Learnosity uses the term called choice matrix. Choice matrix can be a lot of different item types. They can be true, false, yes, no, and you can have any categories there that you want, and we use a variety of different ones. But the matrix just refers to how it's displayed. But it gives us an option to ask a series of questions on the same content, and these are generally a higher difficulty level. So we're asking students to answer 2 or 3 or 4 different questions on the same item, and that way we can reach a higher DOK level. We have some essay items. There are a couple of different kinds that Learnosity differentiates. Most of our items, I think almost all, are rich text. I'm sorry, they're plain text. And the rich text gives us an option to add in things like indentations and bullets and bold and that sort of thing. And sometimes we see that in the very high level literature in like grade 11, 12, we might see that option. But normally we're not necessarily testing students on their format, we're testing them on their knowledge. And so we use the rich text format quite a bit. And we use that throughout our science and math as well. Anytime we have explain your reasoning, explain your understanding, you know, that sort of thing, we have this kind of item. And the answers, we always provide a sample answer, or what we would consider to be an exemplar answer. And in the tool on the teacher side, you'll be able to see what that sample answer is so that you can score that for your students. So you're not left wondering what the answer is to the item. That's readily available to you as a teacher in the teacher tools. This is a chart item. This is probably a little difficult to see just with the screen contrast. The yellow on white, it's much easier for students to see than to see here from the screenshot. But this is an example of dragging the bars up and down to show frequency in a histogram. And you can probably see the yellow outline, but what students would do is they would be down here in the category of 1 to 2, and they would be pulling this line up in order to graph 6 here, pulling this line up to graph 4, and so on. We'll do one of these in the example that I'll show you in the demonstration, but this is a great way for students to show that they know how to graph, and rather than maybe choosing between 4 multiple choice graphs or some of the other item types. We do have some really interesting number line items and number line plots, and you're gonna love these as a teacher if you're a math teacher, because students can graph inequalities and they can graph points, they can graph open circle, closed circle, and so on. But these are technically drag and drops. So if you look up here at this first one, solve the inequality, this is a 2-part item. And the first part, they're going to fill in with a number, what x is greater than or equal to, or sorry, just greater than. And then over here, they're going to graph the solution set. And so these are all draggers. And so depending on whether they think it's opened or closed and which direction the arrow goes, they're going to choose one of these and drag it to the number line. And so we'll demonstrate one of those in a few minutes on the demo test. This is also another one that has places for students to answer and then graph the solution set. So many opportunities for students to graph. We also have coordinate grids. So for those of you who teach and you use coordinate grids, there are several different items types where we do lines, or we can plot points depending on how we set it up. And I think in the demo, I show you how to plot points. And then here, there are statements where you can drag these words into the appropriate box to fill in this statement and to get a correct answer. So these are kind of multi-part items that we have. Again, higher DOK, demonstrating quite a bit more understanding of the concept. We have other graphs like pictographs. So those of you in the lower elementary grades, if you're doing pictographs and you want to have students create one, and one of the types of questions that Common Core asks a lot, in addition to explain your reasoning, is to demonstrate or model graphing. And so this is an excellent way for students to be able to drag either the full book or the half book to these bars and build their graph. This is what it looks like in the answer section on the teacher side. So you can see what the correct answers are for each row. So row 1 is this many books, and row 2, row 3, and so on. So it compresses it so that it doesn't take up so much space on the teacher side. But you always have access to what the correct answers are. We have some items that Learnosity calls closed text, but closed text is just Learnosity's name for fill in the blank. So I'm sure you're used to fill in the blank items. So they're items set up with response boxes. Sometimes those boxes are within a table, within an art piece, and sometimes they're just separate by themselves. So I'll show you a couple of those in the demo. We have drawing tools. So Ira draws this composite shape in art class out of a triangle and a trapezoid, draw lines to show the shapes. And so students have the option of choosing the line and drawing a line. They can erase it, they can exit out and start over, they can go back. So there's a lot of options there in case they mess it up. And if they're really bad with the mouse drawing, well, the students probably aren't. I think it's the older folks like us that are probably struggling with the line drawing, but they'll catch on to it pretty quickly. We also have the option to make some of these things not scored. So you might see an item, I just wrote one the other day about model the area of something and then write the formula for the area or find the area and then find the perimeter. So the model part of it was just shading in boxes on a grid, but it's not scored. So students have the option of drawing all kinds of things there. It's not scored. The only thing we're scoring them on is can they find the area or can they find the perimeter. So we do have options for those to be scored and not scored appropriately. This is one of my favorites, but this is an example of drop down from our grade 8 science course. For those of you who teach science, you'll recognize this is a pedigree chart. And so you'll see whether the circles are female, the squares are male, and then whether or not one of these is a carrier or affected status. So I'll click here so you can see what the answer looks like. So this first drop down is carrier female, and then way down here, affected male, affected female. So you can choose those from the drop down list. So students have the options to get those correct without necessarily getting the spelling correct because they're set as drop downs. We have a couple more items types to talk about. Classification is one of those. Students can move or drag the choices into categories. So again, this is kind of it's hard to see on here because of the contrast, but the waves with lower frequency is one category and waves with higher frequency is another category. And so students can drag anything that has one of these draggers on it, can drag these to particular categories. Then we have match lists, and these are one-to-one correspondence. So there are 5 choices here, and there are 5 draggers across the top. And so students can drag these maps into a particular box in order to determine which map represents fire or snow cover or vegetation and so on. So we do have some that are one-to-one correspondence. We also have some like this where we label an image using words to describe how light can interact with matter. And so students are dragging these 3 terms into 3 different locations. And one nice thing about it is if you drag one into a box and then you change your mind, you can either drag it right back out or you can replace it. So if you drag a second one into that box, it'll replace it and bump the other one out. So I'll show you that during the demo. And this is our last one that we're going to look at. The item types is drag and drop. And we have labels here. You can see that there are joint moves in all directions, joint moves forwards and backwards. And so there's several different places to drag those to. And you'll notice there's 5 different places to drag these to. So these are what are called refillable draggers. So you drag it one place and then you can drag it to a second place and then drag it to a third place. It replenishes itself. So we have lots of items that use that type as well. So let's talk for a couple of minutes about where and what we did with our assessments so that you know for your particular content area what we have available. For middle school math, we converted our multiple choice quizzes from the online or on-level practice books. And we also wrote entirely new items that match Alpha Math and are Common Core aligned. So we have lesson quizzes, mid-chapter quizzes, chapter tests, and then those beginning and end of year tests. For middle school science, we did new items that match Alpha Science. They're NGSS aligned. They're written by the same team who wrote the books. Same is true of math. Our editorial team wrote the math books and wrote the assessments. In addition, our middle school science team wrote the book and wrote the assessments. So that should give you some relief that they're very well aligned. And in science for middle school, we have lesson quizzes, chapter tests, and then beginning and end of year tests. We converted from print. We have print assessments for our reading and literature, and for our elementary math and science programs. We have print assessment books. We've converted every item in those, except for the performance tasks that can't necessarily go into a Learnosity format. Everything else has been converted into Learnosity. So Alpha Reading, Alpha Literature, all of the unit tests, the weekly quizzes, the Alpha Math and Science for elementary have all been converted. And you might be asking about grade K because we do have kindergarten reading and we do have kindergarten mathematics. We have not done assessment banks for kindergarten, primarily because assessment of this type isn't the best for kindergarten. This is better for students who already have at least some reading mastery at that early level. And assessments of this kind really aren't recommended for grade K. We might go back in at some point and do some worksheets and things like that. But as of now, we don't have anything in our program for grade K in our test banks. If you want to learn more about Learnosity, looking forward to the day that you might want to create your own assessments, there's no login required to go to their authoring site and look at all the different item types, how do they function, demonstrations. In case you want to demonstrate a couple of things to your class before they actually do an assessment, there's no logins required and no username or password to go in and learn more from them. We also have set up an email for tech support. And again, this will be on the recording, but you might want to write down if you're having any sort of technology issue. You know, I'm here as an editor and as a writer and someone who's worked on this project from that side. I'm not an IT expert or a technology expert. So we do have a support at alphapublishing.com set up specifically for questions relating to the assessments. There are a couple of things to know too before we go to the demo. The student calculator feature right now is completely disabled. There are still keyboards if students need to key in an answer, but we disabled the calculator feature so that if you decide later you want to make your own, you can enable the calculator feature. But overall, students who need it have handheld devices. And so we weren't too concerned about having them access the calculator in Learnosity. Students can also cannot print any reports. We felt that was an important security thing for you as a teacher, that a student doesn't take a test, print the results, pass it around the class, and so on. So we've disabled the student printing, but there are many teacher printing options. So I'm going to do a demonstration right now, logging in as a teacher, finding and assigning a test, and then logging in as the student to take the test, and then logging back in as the teacher to view the reports. So a couple things to keep in mind here. The first one is that when you log in as a teacher or use your demo login, I'm going to do a demo test that has a mixture of items. It has some science, it has some math, it has some ELA. It also has multiple different grade levels. What you're going to see is not this demo test. What you're going to see is your particular grade and your particular chapters and lessons. So let me pause this here, and we're going to go to the eAlpha site, and we're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to make sure, I think I'm logged in. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go to the assessment tab, and this is not yet where you're going to log in with your logins. You're going to wait a little bit to do that. So you're going to watch me do a couple things first, and then I'll turn you loose to work on your own. So from the assessment tab, you have several options here: assign assessments, assessment reports, and how to use assessments. So first I want to show you how to use assessments. We're not going to go through all these resources here, but there's an introduction, there's how to use, and then how to contact support. I just want to point that out so that you've seen what's available there to you as a teacher. We're going to go up here to assign assessments right now, and we'll come back and do reports in a minute. So when you go to assign assessments, what comes up first is your course. And I'm logged in as a grade 5 teacher. So I'm just going to choose math, and it'll default to grade 5. Your access will default to whatever your access is. So if you're a reading teacher, grade 3, it'll default to that when you open up. And so I'm going to search for what's available for Alpha Math grade 5. So what you see first is the demo for the teacher training. That's what we're going to do as a practice. But I want to show you these other tests that are here and explain how we organize them. So first of all, you can click on any of these that are linked. We'll just click on one so you can see it. And it'll show you what the assessment looks like. We're having a storm here, so it's loading a little slowly. Sorry about that. I hope you can't hear the thunderstorm too loudly. But this shows you just kind of in a quick nutshell what the items look like, what the answers are. So that's one thing that you can view from the assign assessments. But I'm going to go back and show you the hierarchy of it first. So for math, we have several different things that are kind of codes here. BOY is beginning of year. AB is our assessment book. So we have 3 different components that we have converted items. The assessment book is one, and if you scroll down for a little bit, sorry for the scrolling, close your eyes if it bothers you, you're going to see PB, which is practice book. So these are those multiple choice quizzes that we converted. And then also we have student book pieces. And this is what I talked about earlier with checkpoint, reflection check, finish line, and chapter test. We took those 4 pieces from each chapter and we converted those into Learnosity as well. So those can be assigned as tests, they can be assigned as practice, as homework, however you see fit. So if you're going to do math, that's how math is structured for elementary. And science is structured very similar to that. Middle school is structured a little bit differently because in middle school we have grade, chapter, lesson, and so forth. So it's in a very typical format there because we have all new content there. So let me show you how to do the assignment. Here's the demo for teacher training, and we're going to hit assign. And when you get to this screen, you have an option of, do I want to assign it to a whole class or just choose from the students? So since we're here doing this tonight, I'm just going to choose from the students because I want to be a specific student and log in and take the test. We have to choose from the class who we want to assign it to. So I think the one I want is this one. And I'm going to set the start date as today and the due date as tomorrow. And of course, you can set that however you decide you want to set that. If it's an assessment, you probably want to give it a very short timeline. If it's a practice, you might give them 2 days or 3 days or the weekend. So it just depends on your need. We didn't want to pigeonhole anyone into having to choose something in particular. You can also set the duration. How long do students have to do it once they start it? So if it's a quiz, you can reduce that. If it's a test, you can leave it at 60 minutes. If you have a student who requires more time, you can change that. So those are just some options for you. So I've decided that this particular student is going to take the demo, and I'm going to assign it to that student. And then what comes up is the assessment was assigned successfully. If you get a screen that says this assessment has already been assigned to the student, then you need to go back and figure out, do I need to remove it? Maybe it's outside of the time limit. Maybe you gave them 2 days to do it and they didn't do it, but it's still assigned to them. So you have to go back in and reassign it. And then you can see here under assigned assessments, where I just assigned myself this demo for teacher training right here. So I'm going to log out as a teacher, and I'm going to log back in as the student, and forgive all of my logins here. I have way too many. I've been practicing with the tool, making sure everything works properly. So I'm going to log back in as this particular student. I think I chose the right one. We'll know in a minute. But you can see here there's 4 pending assignments. And these 3 have expired. They're black, they're not hyperlinked, they're black, and you can see they've expired. So maybe you assigned them to a student and they didn't take them. You'll know that from this list. But this one is still a live link. So we're going to click on this and we're going to do the assessment. And I think it only has maybe 12 or 13 questions, but it'll give you an idea of what it looks like. And just remember what I said earlier, this is kind of a combination of reading and science and literature and math. So your tests won't look like this, but I didn't want, anybody to think we were favoring math or science or reading or one group over another. So I made a test that was a mixture. So students are going to hit start when they want to begin, and that's when the time clock begins. So if you've given them 60 minutes, that's when their clock begins. So you can see up here in the upper right corner, there's a countdown clock, and there are 13 items, and we're on item number 1. So there are a couple things to note here. First of all, there's a bar across the top that's a progress bar. So as we work our way through the items, this blue bar will get longer and longer. And also there is a list of items here, and students can do them in any order that they want. Or they can skip one, they can come back to it later. So there's no restriction on any of that. But most of the students are probably just going to do the next button. They're just going to do next, next, next. So this is a tally chart to make a bar graph. We talked about this one a little bit earlier. So if you're going to graph how many tallies there are for comedy, that's 4. And you see how you grab this down here and drag it up. Action would be 6, musical would be 2, animation would be 5, and then there are questions associated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to partially answer. So how many, from the graph, how many people chose movies or comedy movies? I'm going to say 4, and you see how the keyboard appears. If the keyboard's in your way, you can drag it out of the way, so you can position it wherever you want. And students can actually use their keyboard or use this keyboard. They can do either one. So I'm going to leave part of this unanswered so that you can see what happens. If I click next, the students will see this. More answers are required. So it prompts them that they haven't really finished that item, but they can go ahead and then they can come back. So there's some option there for the student. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. And that way you can see what it looks like in the teacher scoring, you know, when a student doesn't quite complete something or doesn't finish it. So for this chart problem, we're going to choose from the drop-down menu. So 0.04 liters is 40 milliliters. So we're just going to choose some answers here. Try to get most of them right if I can, but we'll see on the testing scoring what happens there. And then we're going to go to next, or you can choose the item here. But you notice that this blue bar is moving, and over here, this bar is moving as well as students go through the items. Drag this 3/5 plus 1/5 to the right place on the graph, and they'll snap in place. We've set them all to snap. You know, once it gets close enough, it'll snap to the right spot. Plot points on the coordinate plane. So I can plot a point for 2, 4. I can plot a point for 4, 2. And let's say I forget to plot the third one. We'll just leave it that way. Choose true or false for each statement. So this is one of those that we called a choice matrix. So it's a series of questions that students can answer. This one happens to be for math. All parallelograms are quadrilaterals. So we're going to choose some true or false here. We don't need to actually always attempt to get them right on the demo. We'll just see what happens when we grade it. Find the volume of the prism. So length times width times height, 120. And again, I can do 120 here, or I can do 120 on the keyboard. And this is movable, draggable to wherever you want. Anything that has dots or something like that is a draggable feature. These are my favorite number lines. You can graph the inequality. So students have to demonstrate if they understand greater than or equal to and which direction the line goes. So if they choose greater than or equal to, they might want to use this one. They might want it to start at -5. So there's different ones they can choose. They can go that direction, they can go this direction, depending on what they choose. And we are going to do some wrong here, so we see what shows up in the teacher scoring. Which sentence shows the correct comma placement? So we've got some literature and reading in here. This one's a science one. This is one that involves draggers. So this is the design process, the steps in the design process. So first they're going to identify a problem, do research, develop multiple possible solutions. And let's say you put this one here and then you change your mind. Oh, before we test the prototype, we have to build the prototype. Do you see how dragging that pushes the other one back out here as a choice again? So if students make a mistake or want to change their mind about it, they can. Here's another drag, match the object to its state of matter. So solid, liquid, gas. Almost doesn't seem like a test, right? We can do sorting. So this is one of those classification ones where each one of these draggers goes into a box. So these are tools to observe and tools to measure. So you observe with a microscope, with a magnifying glass, with a telescope, and you measure with the digital balance, the graduated cylinder, and the thermometer. And we're almost done. I think we just have 2 more. So refer to these figures and drag the figure number into each space of the Venn diagram. So shapes with parallel sides, shapes with right angles, and overlap, and then neither. So I'm just going to fill these in rather than try to write them, figure out all the right ones. We're just going to drag them in so we can see it in the teacher report. And then what does the prefix for in the word forecast mean? Another literature reading one. And then you'll notice that our progress bar is all the way across. So the student has done all the items, or at least attempted to answer all the items. Remember, they got that error message on that first one, so they might want to go back. You can see here, it's all the way down the side as well. So they've done all the items that are here. They're going to hit review, and it's going to ask them, do they want to go back? They can go back and look. Fully attempted, fully attempted. Do you see here, partially attempted? It gives them a prompt to check it again. And if they're satisfied that they're done, they're going to hit finish. And then they're going to submit. And again, it prompts them, one question's unattempted. Are you sure you want to submit? Now, what you'll see here, this happens sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you'll see that it's still in the list and it's still a hot link. It hasn't submitted yet. So you might need to prompt students to open it up and submit it again. This is something our IT department's working on, and I think they're close to making sure that that doesn't happen. But just in case, make sure that students look at that list and that one that they did has cleared the list, and it's actually been submitted. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out as the student and log back in as the teacher. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go to assessments, and I'm going to go to assessment reports, because I've already done assign the assessments. I want to see how the student or group of students did on that assessment. So you can see here that I have several different things that I've assigned. I just populated the list with those, but this is the one that I assigned today. And I did a couple of also a couple of other students, so you could see what it looks like as a little class. But there are 3 students who took this, and this last one here, that's interesting. I've not seen that before. I'm going to ask IT about that. So these are the 3 students who took the test. Now this is the one that I just took with us today, student 3, but I did these earlier just so that you had the view of kind of a whole class. So this tells you for the students who did what, and which ones they missed. You can hover over. You can also see how much time did they spend on it. 9 seconds, 18 seconds, or maybe they spent a really long time doing one. So there are a lot of different things that you can glean from this. I want to go back here and show you this. This has all the answers for what we just did. So the answers are readily available to you. So I just wanted to show you that as well.
Thank you very much for participating today. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Great to talk to you, Gloria. Have a good night, everybody.